At my dad's funeral, my husband locked me out of a $30 million condo. I found out because my phone buzzed while I was standing beside my father's casket. A short notification from the building concierge, access revoked. Please contact primary account holder. I didn't react. I didn't gasp. I didn't even look up. I just slipped my phone back into my black clutch and kept my eyes on the polished mahogany coffin in front of me. I'm glad you're here. Stay with me until the end, and tell me what city you're watching from. I want to know how far this story travels. The chapel at St. Andrew's in downtown Chicago was filled with white lilies. My father loved clean lines and expensive simplicity. Even in death, nothing about this day was chaotic. The string quartet played softly near the altar. The stained glass windows filtered pale afternoon light across the marble floor. It should have been a dignified farewell. Instead, it became the moment I understood my marriage was over. I am 68 years old. I buried my mother 15 years ago. I buried my older brother 10 years ago. But nothing prepared me for watching them lower my father's coffin into the ground while my husband quietly erased me from a property he thought was his. Daniel stood 3 rows behind me during the service. Not beside me. 3 rows back. Close enough for photographs. Far enough to avoid conversation. When the priest spoke about loyalty and legacy, I felt Daniel's eyes on me. Measuring. Calculating. He had always been good at calculation. After the burial, guests began filtering out toward the black sedans waiting along Michigan Avenue. The wind off Lake Michigan cut through my wool coat, sharp and uninvited. I accepted condolences. I thanked old business partners. I hugged women who had known me since college. Daniel finally approached me near the stone archway. You okay? He asked. He didn't call me sweetheart. Didn't touch my hand. I'm fine, I said. He nodded once, as if confirming something in his own head. We should talk later, he added quietly. Later. As if this day needed another agenda item. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from the condo's front desk manager, Thomas. Mrs. Whitmore, we received instructions this morning to update entry permissions. Please let us know if you have any questions. Instructions. This morning. My father had died 48 hours earlier. The funeral began at 2 p.m. And somehow, between the obituary and the eulogy, my husband had found time to remove my biometric access from the condo overlooking Grant Park. The condo he believed he controlled. The condo valued at $30 million. I didn't confront him there. Not in front of the cameras. Not in front of the extended family. My father despised public scenes. He believed dignity was currency. Instead, I watched Daniel walk toward a small cluster of men near the parking lot. 2 of them were from his private equity firm. The third was someone I recognized from a refinancing meeting last spring. Refinancing. I moved closer, slowly, as if I were simply searching for my driver. It's taken care of, Daniel was saying. She won't complicate anything. Won't complicate anything. One of the men asked, You sure the asset's clean? Daniel gave a tight smile. It's under control. Asset. Not home. Not residence. Asset. I felt something inside my chest go very still. For 12 years, I had listened to Daniel discuss mergers, acquisitions, leveraged buyouts. I had smiled through dinners where he reduced buildings and companies to numbers on a spreadsheet. But I had never imagined he would reduce me the same way. The condo had been my father's idea. 3 years ago, he called me into his study at the lake house in Wisconsin. He poured 2 glasses of bourbon, though I rarely drank more than a sip. Eleanor, he said, leaning back in his leather chair. A woman should always have one thing no one can take from her. He slid a folder across the desk. Inside were renderings of the penthouse. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Private elevator. Views stretching from Navy Pier to the horizon. I don't need this, I told him. Yes, you do, he replied. You just don't know it yet. Daniel had been enthusiastic at the time. He'd admired the architecture. Talked about appreciation value. Tax advantages. He had assumed it was part of a larger portfolio. He had assumed many things. Back at the funeral reception, I excused myself early. I told Daniel I needed rest. He didn't offer to drive me. I'll head to the condo later, he said casually. There are a few documents I want to review. Of course there were. I won't be there tonight, I answered. He paused. Why not? I need quiet, I said. I'm going to the house in Evanston. He studied my face, searching for cracks. There were none. When I reached the car, I let myself breathe for the first time all afternoon. The driver closed the door softly. Chicago traffic hummed around us. I opened my phone again. The building's app showed my profile grayed out. Access denied. Garage entry revoked. Elevator authorization removed. Primary account holder, Daniel Whitmore. I stared at that line for a long time. Primary account holder. He must have believed that because he handled most of the household finances, because he signed certain checks, because he spoke confidently in boardrooms, the condo naturally defaulted to him. What he didn't know was simple. The condo did not belong to Daniel. It did not technically belong to me either. My father had never been careless with ownership, especially not with something worth $30 million. As the car turned north along Lakeshore Drive, my phone rang. The caller ID displayed a name I hadn't seen in months. Martin Reynolds, my father's attorney. I answered on the second ring. Eleanor, he said gently. I was hoping to catch you today. I assumed you might, I replied. There was a brief silence. Respectful. Measured. Have you spoken to Daniel? He asked. Not about anything that matters. Another pause. He contacted our office this morning, Martin said. Requested documentation regarding the Grant Park property. I looked out the window at the skyline. Steel and glass rising against a gray sky. And I asked. We informed him, Martin continued carefully, that the property is not transferable without trustee approval. Trustee. I closed my eyes. And who? I asked, though I already knew, is the trustee? You are, Eleanor. The city blurred past the window. Daniel had locked me out of a property he could not legally control. He had removed my access from a home governed by a family trust established before our marriage. He thought he had changed the locks. What he had actually done was reveal his intentions. Does he know? I asked. No, Martin answered. He doesn't. I let the silence stretch between us. Good, I said finally. When I arrived at the house in Evanston, the sun was setting over the lake. The sky glowed faintly pink, then dimmed into blue. I stood in the foyer, still wearing black. My father used to say grief reveals character faster than success ever will. Today, mine remained intact. Daniel's had not. I placed my phone on the console table and removed my gloves slowly. He believed the condo was an asset he could leverage. He believed I would be too fragile, too distracted by morning to notice. He believed wrong. And that was the first mistake he made. The house in Evanston was too quiet that night. Not peaceful, not comforting, just quiet in a way that makes you aware of every clock ticking. I left my heels by the door and walked into the kitchen without turning on the lights. The lake beyond the windows was black and endless. My father used to say the water calmed him. Tonight, it felt like a mirror, still on the surface, depth impossible to measure. I didn't cry. I poured a glass of water, took 2 slow sips, set it down carefully. Grief, I've learned, doesn't always arrive as tears. Sometimes it arrives as clarity. My phone buzzed again. Daniel. I let it ring twice before answering. Where are you? He asked. At Evanston. A pause. Why? I told you. I needed quiet. Another pause, longer this time. I could hear faint city noise behind him. Traffic, an elevator ding. You should have told me before leaving, he said. I went up to the condo. Of course he did. And? I asked evenly. They updated security protocols, he replied, irritation creeping into his voice. Apparently, I'm the primary account holder now. You must have signed something last year. I leaned against the marble counter. No, I said calmly. I didn't. He exhaled sharply. Well, it doesn't matter. I'll sort it out tomorrow. Sort it out. Like I was a calendar conflict. I'm sure you will, I answered. He hesitated. You sound strange. My father died 2 days ago, Daniel. Silence. I know, he said finally. I just meant distant. I didn't respond. Get some rest, he added. We'll talk in the morning. We will. But not the way he expected. When the call ended, I stared at the dark reflection of myself in the kitchen window. 68 years old. Black dress. Pearl earrings. Still standing straight. 3 years ago, when my father established the Hamilton Family Trust, he did it quietly. No announcement. No dramatic reading. Just paperwork and precision. He had asked me one question back then. Do you trust your husband with everything? I'd answered yes, without hesitation. I remember that now with a strange detachment. Not regret. Just observation. Trust, I've learned, isn't about love. It's about leverage. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. I made coffee the way my father taught me. Measured, exact. 2 scoops. No guesswork. At 7:15 a.m., my phone rang again. Martin. He's already called twice. Martin said without greeting. Requested immediate transfer authority. Denied. I asked. Of course. I sat at the small breakfast table, facing the lake. What exactly did he request? I asked. A line of credit against the property. 30% valuation. I almost smiled. He was moving quickly. Did he sound concerned? I asked. Confident, Martin replied. Which is usually more dangerous. I traced my finger along the rim of my coffee cup. Daniel had always been at his most ambitious when he sensed vulnerability. When my mother passed, he insisted we consolidate accounts for efficiency. When my brother's business struggled, Daniel offered advice that positioned him as the quiet savior. He didn't see himself as manipulative. He saw himself as strategic. I want a meeting, I said. With him. Martin was quiet for a second. You're sure? Yes. All right, he said. This afternoon. Make it formal. I ended the call and finally allowed myself to sit still. The funeral flowers were still arranged in the living room. White lilies beginning to open fully, their scent heavier now. My father once told me something that seemed harsh at the time. Eleanor, people reveal who they are when they think you're distracted. Daniel believed I was distracted by loss. He believed I would sign whatever he placed in front of me. He believed I wouldn't ask questions. Around 10 a.m., he arrived at Evanston without warning. His knock was firm. Controlled. I opened the door. He stepped inside, scanning the room like he always did, assessing value. You didn't answer my texts, he said. I was making coffee. He looked tired. Not from grief. From frustration. Martin called me, he said. Said there's some technicality with the condo. There is, I replied. What kind of technicality? The legal kind. He ran a hand through his hair. Eleanor, this isn't the time for games. I met his eyes steadily. I agree. We stood facing each other in the quiet living room. The lilies between us like silent witnesses. I need liquidity for a short-term position, he continued. The condo is sitting there doing nothing. Doing nothing. It's not sitting, I said softly. It's protected. He frowned slightly. Protected from what? I let the question hang in the air. From assumption, I said finally. He didn't understand yet. But he would. And for the first time since the funeral, I felt something settle inside me. Not anger. Not revenge. Just alignment. My father had prepared for this long before I ever imagined needing it. Daniel had changed the locks. But he hadn't read the deed. And that difference was about to matter. Daniel didn't stay long that morning. He walked through the house like a man inspecting property, not visiting his wife. His eyes lingered on the artwork, the antique sideboard, the Persian rug my parents bought in 1978. He was calculating. He always calculated. I have a call at 11, he said finally, adjusting his cufflinks. We'll finish this tonight. We will, I replied. He paused at the doorway. Eleanor, don't make this harder than it needs to be. Harder. I gave him a small nod. Drive safely. When the door closed, the house felt lighter. Not because he was gone. Because something inside me had shifted. For years, I had interpreted Daniel's control as leadership. His decisiveness as strength. His management of our finances as care. But standing in my father's living room, surrounded by decades of steady, deliberate choices, I saw the difference. My father built. Daniel leveraged. Around noon, Martin's office confirmed the meeting, 3:30 p.m., downtown. Formal review of the Hamilton Family Trust. Daniel would attend. He believed he was going to clarify a technicality. He had no idea he was walking into a boundary. I changed out of black and into a navy suit. Structured. Simple. No jewelry except my wedding band and the pearl studs I hadn't removed since the funeral. The drive into the city was quiet. Chicago traffic moved slowly along Lakeshore Drive. The skyline looked the same as it always had. Stable. Indifferent. By 3:20 p.m., I was seated in Martin's conference room on the 22nd floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows. A long walnut table. A carafe of water placed precisely in the center. I didn't check my phone. At 3:28, Daniel walked in. Confident stride. Dark suit. Controlled expression. He kissed my cheek lightly like we were attending a charity gala. Martin, he said, extending his hand. Let's clear this up. We all sat. Martin opened a leather folder and folded his hands calmly. Mr. Whitmore, he began, you requested documentation regarding the Grant Park condominium. That's right, Daniel said. There seems to be confusion about authority. There is no confusion, Martin replied evenly. Only structure. Daniel leaned back slightly. Then explain it. Martin slid a document across the table. Not hurried. Not dramatic. The condominium, he said, is owned by the Hamilton Family Trust, established June 14th, 3 years ago. Daniel barely glanced at the paper. Yes, I'm aware of the trust. Are you aware of its terms? Martin asked. Daniel's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I assume Eleanor is a beneficiary. I am, I said quietly. Martin continued. She is also the sole trustee. Silence. The room didn't change. But the air did. Daniel's fingers stopped tapping the table. What does that mean exactly, he asked. It means, Martin said calmly, that no asset within the trust can be leveraged, refinanced, or transferred without Mrs. Whitmore's explicit authorization. Daniel turned to me. You didn't tell me that. You didn't ask, I answered. His expression shifted, just slightly. Not anger. Not yet. Calculation adjusting. I'm her husband, he said to Martin. We share assets. Some, Martin replied. Not this one. Daniel leaned forward now. There must be a provision for spousal access. There is not. The words settled on the table like a paperweight. Daniel's voice lowered. This is unnecessary. No, I said softly. It's intentional. He looked at me fully then. For what purpose, he asked. I held his gaze. Protection. From me. His tone sharpened. From assumption, I repeated. Martin cleared his throat gently. Mr. Whitmore, your request this morning for a line of credit against the property was denied because you do not have the authority to initiate one. Daniel's composure thinned. I was acting in our best interest, he said. Were you? I asked. He turned toward me, frustration rising. Eleanor, I'm managing opportunities. Markets move fast. So does grief, I said quietly. He went still. For the first time since the funeral, he looked uncertain. You think I would jeopardize us? He asked. I didn't answer immediately. I thought about the changed locks. The revoked access. The phrase primary account holder. I think, I said carefully, that you moved quickly while I was burying my father. Silence again. This one heavier. Martin slid another document forward. There is one additional clause, he said. In the event of marital dissolution, trust assets remain entirely separate. Daniel stared at the page. Marital dissolution? He repeated. It's standard language, Martin replied. I folded my hands in front of me. No threats. No raised voice. Just structure. Daniel looked at me as if seeing something unfamiliar. You're serious, he said. Yes. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it. So what now? He asked, voice lower. Now, I said evenly, nothing changes. But I won't be using the condo as collateral. He sat back slowly. The confidence he carried into the room had shifted into something else. Not defeat. Not yet. But awareness. You blindsided me, he said. I almost smiled. No, I replied. You just didn't read carefully. The meeting ended 10 minutes later. No shouting. No dramatic exit. Just signatures acknowledging receipt of documents. As we stepped into the elevator together, Daniel finally spoke. You're making a mistake, he said quietly. The doors closed. I looked straight ahead at our reflection in the mirrored walls. No, I said. I'm correcting one. The elevator ride down from Martin's office was quiet. Too quiet for a married couple. The mirrored walls reflected two people standing side by side, who looked composed. Controlled. Civilized. Strangers. Daniel kept his eyes forward. You could have talked to me first, he said finally. I did, I replied. 3 years ago. He glanced at me. About what? About transparency. The elevator doors opened into the marble lobby. Late afternoon light streamed through the glass entrance. Chicago traffic moved steadily outside. He stepped out first. I was trying to protect our position, he said as we walked toward the revolving doors. Our position? I repeated. Yes. Markets are unstable. Liquidity matters. I stopped walking. So does trust, I said. People moved around us. Suits. Heels. Briefcases. No one noticed the quiet fracture forming between us. Daniel lowered his voice. You're overreacting. There it was. Not anger. Minimizing. I'm not reacting, I said calmly. I'm observing. His jaw tightened. You think I'd steal from you? The word hung between us. Steal. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I pictured the notification from the concierge. The locks changed while I stood beside my father's coffin. I think, I said slowly, you assumed control without conversation. That's not the same thing. It is to me. He exhaled sharply and looked away toward the street. This is grief talking. No, I replied. This is clarity. He didn't respond. We stood there another second, two well-dressed people in the middle of downtown Chicago, separated by something neither of us could ignore anymore. I have a dinner, he said finally. We'll talk later. Of course. He walked off toward his car without looking back. I watched him go, not with sadness, with understanding. For 12 years, I had mistaken decisiveness for devotion. I thought his confidence meant security. I thought being managed meant being cared for. But protection doesn't remove your access. Protection doesn't change the locks. That evening, I didn't return to Evanston. I asked the driver to take me to the Grant Park condo. When we pulled into the underground garage, I handed my phone to the attendant. My access was revoked yesterday, I said. Please call Thomas. The attendant nodded respectfully. Within minutes, Thomas himself appeared from the elevator lobby, slightly out of breath. Mrs. Whitmore, he said. I was expecting you. I imagine you were, I replied. He lowered his voice. We received instructions yesterday morning from Mr. Whitmore's office to update biometric permissions. It appeared authorized. It was not, I said evenly. I understand now. He gestured toward the private elevator. We've restored your credentials. I stepped into the elevator alone. The doors closed softly. As it ascended, I felt something settle inside me again. Not triumph. Not anger. Ownership. The doors opened directly into the penthouse foyer. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city in gold and blue twilight. The lake shimmered in the distance. The hardwood floors gleamed under recessed lighting. It was silent, untouched. I walked slowly through the living room, running my fingers lightly along the back of the leather sofa. Everything exactly where I had left it before the funeral. Except one thing. On the kitchen island sat a slim leather folder. Daniel's. I opened it. Inside were printed valuation reports. Projected appreciation charts. Notes in his handwriting about refinancing structures and short-term capital deployment. He hadn't come here to grieve. He had come to calculate. I closed the folder carefully and set it back down. Then I walked to the window overlooking the park. My father stood here with me the day we first toured the finished space. He'd placed his hands behind his back and studied the skyline. Beautiful, he said. Yes, I'd agreed. He looked at me, not the view. This isn't about real estate, Eleanor, he said. It's about independence. At the time, I thought he was being overly cautious. Dramatic, even. Now I understood. My phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. We need to align. This tension isn't productive. Align. Like I was a quarterly objective. I typed back slowly. I'm at the condo. 3 dots appeared almost instantly. Why? I waited a full minute before replying. To make sure the locks work. No response. I placed my phone face down on the marble counter and walked toward the bedroom hallway. The master suite was calm. Neutral tones. Clean lines. A space designed for rest. I sat at the edge of the bed and looked around. 3 years ago, I believed this home symbolized our future. Tonight, it symbolized a decision. Not about property. About pattern. Daniel didn't explode when confronted. He recalibrated. That's what made this dangerous. Because a man who recalibrates doesn't retreat. He strategizes. And I had just drawn a boundary he didn't anticipate. As night settled fully over Chicago, city lights flickered on one by one below me. I stood and walked back into the living room. This condo wasn't leverage. It wasn't liquidity. It wasn't an asset to deploy. It was a line. And for the first time in my marriage, I had made it clear. He could change the locks. But he couldn't change the structure. And now he knew it. I didn't sleep at the condo that night. I stayed until nearly midnight, long enough to watch the last office lights flicker off across the skyline. Long enough to feel the space settle around me again. Then I went back to Evanston. I didn't tell Daniel. When I woke the next morning, there were 3 missed calls and 1 voicemail. His voice was controlled. Too controlled. Eleanor, we need to handle this like adults. Call me. Like adults. I made coffee before returning the call. He answered on the first ring. Where did you go last night? He asked. Home, I said. That is home. No, I replied calmly. It's a property. A pause. You're being deliberate with your wording, he said. Yes. Another silence. I spoke with my attorney this morning, he continued. Of course he did. And? I asked. He says trusts can be contested. I took a slow sip of coffee. They can be. I agreed. But it's expensive. Public. Messy. He let that sit there like a warning. My father hated mess. Daniel knew that. You drag this through probate court? I asked quietly. If I have to protect my interests. There it was again. Interests. I set my cup down. Daniel, I said evenly. You attempted to leverage a property while I was planning my father's funeral. That's not fair. It's factual. He exhaled through his nose. Timing is irrelevant. No, I said. Timing is character. The line went silent. Then he shifted tactics. Look, he said, voice softer now. We've built a life together. This doesn't need to escalate. I didn't answer immediately. Escalate. As if I were the one raising stakes. I'm not escalating, I said. I'm clarifying. Clarifying what? That I will not be managed. Another pause. When he spoke again, the warmth was gone. Fine, he said. Then let's clarify everything. That afternoon, I received an email from his office. Subject line, financial review and asset alignment. Attached were spreadsheets, shared accounts, investment breakdowns, retirement projections. It looked thorough, professional, impressive, but something was missing. The Hamilton Trust. He hadn't included it. He was building a narrative, one where the condo was peripheral, optional, unnecessary. He wanted to make it seem as if I was clinging to something symbolic instead of structural. I forwarded the email to Martin. Within minutes, he called. He's positioning, Martin said. I know. He may try to argue commingling of funds. He won't win. No, Martin agreed. But he might hope you'll settle before it gets that far. Settle? For what? Access? Permission? Approval? I'm not negotiating ownership, I said calmly. Good, Martin replied. Because the trust wasn't designed to be negotiated. That evening, Daniel came to Evanston again. This time, he didn't knock hard. He knocked carefully. I let him in. He didn't remove his coat. I don't want this to become adversarial, he said immediately. It already is, I replied. He walked into the living room, glancing around like he expected something to have changed. Nothing had. What do you want, he asked. I studied him. For years, that question would have unsettled me. I would have rushed to reassure him. Smooth tension. Compromise quickly. Now, I answered simply. Respect. He almost laughed. You have it. No, I said softly. I don't. His eyes hardened. You're rewriting history. No, I replied. I'm rereading it. The room felt smaller. You're willing to fracture our marriage over a property? He asked. I held his gaze. No, I said. You were. That landed. He looked away first. You've changed, he said quietly. Yes. When? I thought about the funeral. The notification. The words primary account holder. 2 days ago, I answered. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. You're letting grief distort reality. I'm letting grief remove distraction. He stared at me for a long moment. Then he said something that told me everything I needed to know. If you push this, he said, it won't end cleanly. Not loud. Not threatening. Just a statement. I nodded once. I know. He waited, perhaps expecting fear. He didn't find it. After a few seconds, he reached into his coat pocket and placed a set of keys on the console table. The condo keys. I won't contest the trust, he said. Not yet. Not yet. There it was again. Strategy. Not remorse. He turned toward the door. Think carefully about what you're doing, he added. I walked him out without touching him. When the door closed, I picked up the keys slowly. Cool metal. Precise weight. For 12 years, I thought security meant partnership. Now I understood something different. Security means structure. And structure doesn't argue. It holds. I stood there in the quiet house, keys in my hand, and realized something important. Daniel wasn't angry about the condo. He was unsettled because he couldn't control it. And for the first time in our marriage, he couldn't control me either. The keys sat on my console table all night. I didn't move them. I didn't return them. I didn't acknowledge them. They were not symbolic. They were not sentimental. They were evidence. The next morning, I woke before sunrise again. Habit, not anxiety. My father used to say mornings belong to the person who respected them. I dressed in a simple gray sweater and dark slacks. No jewelry today except my watch. At 8:10 a.m., I received a notification from our joint financial account. A transfer request had been initiated. Not completed. Initiated. Amount, $2.4 million. Destination, Whitmore Capital Holdings. I stared at the screen. Daniel hadn't contested the trust. He had adjusted his route. I didn't call him. I called the bank. This is Eleanor Whitmore, I said evenly. I need to confirm authorization protocols on all joint accounts. The representative was polite. Efficient. Yes, Mrs. Whitmore. A transfer was initiated this morning. It's pending dual authorization. Dual, meaning he needed my approval. I will not be authorizing that transfer, I said. Understood. And I would like written confirmation that no transaction above 5 figures clears without in-person verification. There was a brief pause. We can arrange that. Do. When I hung up, I didn't feel shaken. I felt informed. Daniel wasn't retreating. He was redistributing. Around noon, my phone rang. Why did you block the transfer? He asked without greeting. Because you didn't discuss it. I don't need a board meeting for operational liquidity. It's not operational, I replied. It's marital. Silence. It's temporary, he said. Most permanent mistakes are. His tone hardened. You're overcorrecting. No, I said calmly. I'm stabilizing. Another pause. You don't trust me, he said finally. Trust. Such a simple word. I trusted you at the funeral, I said. You changed the locks. That was administrative. It was intentional. He exhaled slowly. You're making this adversarial again. I didn't initiate a $2.4 million transfer without conversation. The line went quiet. When he spoke again, his voice was cooler. If you freeze everything, you hurt both of us. Then we'll both move carefully. He hung up first. That was new. For years, I was the one who ended calls gently, softly, making sure nothing felt unresolved. Now, resolution didn't require softness. That afternoon, I drove back to the Grant Park condo, not to check locks, to review documents. I spread Daniel's printed valuation reports across the dining table. His handwritten notes circled phrases like aggressive timeline and rapid capital reposition. I noticed something else. A separate folder tucked beneath the rest. I opened it. Inside were emails between Daniel and a development group in Miami. Subject line, preliminary acquisition, discretion required. Discretion. The projected buy-in required immediate liquidity. Roughly $3 million. The amount matched the attempted transfer. He wasn't protecting us. He was positioning himself. I sat back slowly. This wasn't about shared growth. It was about independent expansion, funded by shared capital. My father once told me, when someone moves money quickly, look at what they're chasing. I was looking, and I didn't like what I saw. My phone buzzed again. Hey. Text from Daniel. Dinner tonight. 7 p.m. We need to reset. Reset. Like this was a miscommunication. I typed back. Location? He responded with the name of a private club downtown. Neutral ground. Controlled environment. Of course. At 7 p.m., I arrived precisely on time. He was already seated at a corner table. Jacket off. Expression composed. Thank you for coming, he said. I took my seat. I ordered water, he added. Good. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, he leaned forward. I'm not your enemy, he said. I didn't say you were. You're treating me like one. No, I replied evenly. I'm treating you like someone who made unilateral decisions. His jaw tightened. I built my firm on decisive action. This isn't your firm. The words landed between us. This is our life. He studied me carefully. You've never involved yourself in operational details before. I've never needed to. And now I do. The waiter approached. We ordered without discussion. Simple meals. No wine. Daniel folded his hands on the table. What do you want, Eleanor? He asked again. I held his gaze. I want transparency. In writing. On every account. That's excessive. It's structural. He leaned back slowly. You're preparing for something. Yes, I said. For divorce. The word didn't scare me. I'm preparing for clarity. He washed my face carefully, searching for hesitation. He didn't find it. You think I'd leave you vulnerable, he said. I think you already did. Silence. Longer this time. When the food arrived, neither of us touched it. Because this dinner wasn't about reconciliation. It was about boundaries. And for the first time in 12 years, I wasn't asking permission to set them. Daniel thought this was a temporary standoff. A phase. But what he didn't understand yet was this. I wasn't reacting to a single action. I was responding to a pattern. And patterns, once seen, can't be unseen. Dinner ended without resolution. We both left food untouched. Daniel paid the bill. Of course he did. He always preferred the visual of control. Outside the private club, the air was cool. The city lights reflected off the pavement in thin streaks of gold. I'll call you tomorrow, he said. You don't need to, I replied. He studied me, as if trying to determine whether that was defiance or detachment. It was neither. It was independence. That night, I returned to the condo instead of Evanston. Not because I was avoiding him, because I wanted to think where the decision had started. The penthouse was quiet when I entered. The skyline shimmered beyond the glass. I set my coat over the back of a chair and walked directly to my father's old leather briefcase, the one I had brought here after the funeral. Inside were copies of the trust documents. I laid them out across the dining table again. Hamilton Family Trust. Established 3 years ago. Irrevocable. Sole trustee, Eleanor Hamilton Whitmore. Successor trustee, Martin Reynolds. Clear language. Precise structure. My father never built anything casually. My phone buzzed. An email this time. From a woman I didn't recognize. Subject, professional courtesy. I opened it. She introduced herself as an associate at Daniel's firm. She wrote carefully, Mrs. Whitmore, I feel obligated to inform you that your husband has been presenting the Grant Park property as available collateral in preliminary discussions. I assumed you were aware. If not, I thought you should be. No emotion. No accusation. Just information. I read it twice. Then a third time. He wasn't just attempting internal transfers. He was signaling externally. Positioning the condo in negotiations. Even after the meeting. Even after the keys. Even after the dinner. I didn't feel shock. I felt confirmation. I forwarded the email to Martin without commentary. He called within minutes. That's significant, he said. Yes. If he's misrepresenting ownership in formal discussions, that exposes him. I know. There was a pause. Eleanor, Martin added carefully. This is no longer about assumption. It's about misrepresentation. The word settled heavily. Misrepresentation. I don't want spectacle, I said. You won't need one, he replied. Documentation is enough. After the call ended, I walked to the window again. Below me, the park was quiet. A few late joggers moved along the path. The city didn't know my marriage was narrowing into a legal corridor. And it didn't need to. At 10:14 p.m., Daniel called. I answered. Did you contact anyone at my firm? He asked immediately. No. Then why am I getting questions about collateral authority? I leaned against the glass. Perhaps because you mentioned a property you don't control. His voice sharpened. This is getting out of hand. No, I said calmly. It's getting clarified. You're undermining me. I'm protecting myself. Silence. Then, lower. You're embarrassing me. That was new. Not we're struggling. Not this is hard. Embarrassing. I understood then. This wasn't about liquidity. It was about image. You embarrassed yourself, I said quietly. At my father's funeral. He didn't respond immediately. When he did, his voice was colder than I'd ever heard it. You're weaponizing timing. No, I replied. I'm remembering it. Another long pause. You're different, he said again. Yes. What changed? I looked out over the city. The locks. Silence. I was grieving. I continued evenly. You were reallocating. That's unfair. It's accurate. He exhaled sharply. You're pushing this toward something permanent. I'm pushing it toward truth. And if the truth ends us? The question lingered. I didn't rush to reassure him. I won't sacrifice structure to preserve appearance, I said finally. The line went quiet again. Then he spoke in a tone that was almost reflective. I underestimated you. Not apology. Assessment. I know, I answered. After we hung up, I didn't move for several minutes. Underestimated. For 12 years, that had been our quiet arrangement. He moved aggressively. I remained gracious. He expanded. I accommodated. But grief does something unexpected. It removes distraction. Standing beside my father's coffin, watching my phone light up with a lockout notification, I saw everything clearly. Daniel didn't see partnership as shared authority. He saw it as delegated authority. And when he believed I was emotionally occupied, he tried to consolidate control. Not violently. Not loudly. Quietly. Professionally. Strategically. That's what made it dangerous. I walked back to the dining table and gathered the documents neatly. This was no longer reactive. It was procedural. And for the first time in my marriage, I wasn't asking myself how to preserve harmony. I was asking how to preserve autonomy. The difference is subtle. But once you see it, the next morning, I made a decision. Not emotional. Not dramatic. Procedural. At 9 a.m., I called Martin. I want to formalize communication, I said. In what way, he asked. I want all discussions regarding trust assets routed through you. In writing. There was a brief pause. That will escalate things, he said carefully. It will structure them, I replied. He understood the difference. By noon, a formal notice was drafted. Clear language. Professional tone. All inquiries, representations, or financial proposals involving the Grant Park condominium must be directed to the Trustees' Council. Not Daniel. Not his firm. Not informally. Formally. At 1:17 p.m., confirmation arrived that the notice had been delivered to Daniel's office. I didn't call him. I waited. At 2:03 p.m., my phone rang. He didn't bother with greetings. You had a letter sent to my firm? Yes. You're making this public. No, I said evenly. I'm making it documented. His breathing slowed on the other end. You're drawing lines in ink. They were always there. You're humiliating me. There it was again. Not we're breaking. Not this hurts. Humiliation. You misrepresented ownership, I replied calmly. Correction isn't humiliation. His tone sharpened. You could have handled this privately. I tried. Silence. Then, lower. You're forcing my hand. I stood by the window of the condo, looking down at Grant Park. I'm protecting mine. He didn't respond for several seconds. When he did, his voice was controlled again. Fine. Then let's do this properly. Properly. That afternoon, I received notice from his attorney. A request for full financial disclosure. Comprehensive. Aggressive. He wasn't retreating. He was counterbalancing. I sat at the dining table, reading through the pages carefully. This was no longer about a condo. It was about leverage. Daniel believed pressure would push me toward compromise. He had always relied on endurance, assuming I would tire first. But he miscalculated something fundamental. I wasn't exhausted. I was precise. At 5 p.m., I met Martin again. This is predictable, he said, reviewing the documents. He's expanding scope to create friction. Will it work? I asked. Only if you react emotionally. I nodded. I won't. He looked at me steadily. Eleanor, this will likely move towards separation. I know. You're prepared for that. I thought about the funeral, the locks, the transfer attempt, the collateral discussions. I'm prepared for clarity, I said. That evening, Daniel came to the condo without calling. I heard the elevator doors open. He stepped into the foyer, expression tight. You've made your point, he said. I didn't intend it as a point. Then what is this? Structure. He walked further into the living room, glancing around as if the space itself had betrayed him. We could have solved this between us, he said. We had years to do that. His eyes flashed briefly. You think I'm some kind of opportunist? I held his gaze. I think you move quickly when you sense advantage. And you think I sensed advantage at your father's funeral? Yes. The words settled heavily. He ran a hand through his hair. I was trying to secure capital before competitors moved. While I was burying my father. He stopped pacing. You're tying everything back to that day. Because that's when I saw clearly. The room went still. Outside, the city hummed quietly. What do you want? He asked again, softer this time. I want separation of authority. That's not marriage. No, I said calmly. It's autonomy. He looked at me as if trying to locate the woman he married. She was still here, just not silent. You're willing to risk everything, he said. No, I replied. I'm refusing to risk myself. Silence. Then something shifted in his expression. Not anger. Recognition. You're not backing down, he said. No, he nodded slowly. Then we moved forward. Yes, I agreed. But not together. After he left, I stood in the center of the living room for a long moment. The skyline glittered outside. 12 years of marriage had narrowed into one simple realization. Daniel didn't fear losing the condo. He feared losing control of the narrative. And now, for the first time, he didn't own it. Can't unsee it. The formal response came 3 days later. Not from Daniel. From his attorney. A courier delivered the envelope to the Grant Park condo at 10:42 a.m. I signed for it myself. Thick paper. Precise language. Controlled tone. Petition for financial transparency. Request for marital asset review. Notice of intent to evaluate equitable distribution. Equitable. Such a neutral word for something so invasive. I sat at the dining table and read every page slowly. Not scanning. Reading. Daniel wasn't contesting the trust directly. He was widening the battlefield. If he couldn't access the condo through leverage, he would attempt to reframe the entire marriage as a shared financial ecosystem. Shared risk. Shared growth. Shared entitlement. He wanted the court to see everything as blended. Except, of course, the risks he took alone. At 11:30 a.m., Martin arrived. He removed his coat, took the seat across from me, and adjusted his glasses. They filed aggressively, he said. Yes. But not recklessly. No, I agreed. Daniel never moved recklessly. He moved strategically. Martin tapped the document lightly. They're pushing for full disclosure within 14 days. They'll have it. He looked at me carefully. You understand what that means. I do. It meant financial exposure. Scrutiny. A line drawn that could not be erased. It meant this wasn't a standoff anymore. It was progression. Around 1 p.m., my phone rang. Daniel. I answered. You received it, he said. Yes. I didn't want to blindside you. I almost smiled at the choice of word. You did, I replied evenly. Silence. This doesn't have to become hostile, he continued. It already is procedural. That's not what I meant. I know. His voice lowered. You're forcing escalation. No, I said calmly. I'm refusing erosion. There was a long pause. Do you even want this marriage? He asked. The question sounded almost sincere. I didn't rush to answer. I wanted partnership, I said finally. Not management. I never managed you. You changed the locks. He exhaled sharply. That again. Yes, I said. That always. The silence stretched longer this time. You're turning one decision into a verdict, he said. No, I replied. I'm recognizing a pattern. He didn't argue that. Because he couldn't. At 3 p.m., Martin returned with a second folder. Before this moves further, he said carefully, there's something you should see. He opened the folder and turned it toward me. Bank statements, corporate filings, investment positions tied to Whitmore Capital, and highlighted in yellow, short-term debt obligations. Significant ones. I looked up. He's overextended, Martin said quietly. The Miami development isn't the only play. How exposed? I asked. Enough to make liquidity urgent. I absorbed that. Daniel hadn't been repositioning casually. He had been covering gaps. And the condo, the $30 million asset, was stability he couldn't access, which made it threat. He's not just expanding, I said slowly. He's balancing. Yes. I closed the folder gently. Everything aligned now. The funeral, the locks, the transfer, the collateral conversations, the escalation. He hadn't been opportunistic. He had been pressured, and pressure reveals priority. At 6 p.m., Daniel arrived at the condo again. He didn't knock this time. He used the keys he still had. I was waiting in the living room. You've seen the filing, he said. Yes. And I understand. His expression shifted slightly. Understand what? That you're leveraged. His eyes flickered. Briefly. You've been reviewing my firm? He asked carefully. I've been reviewing patterns. He walked further into the room, removing his jacket slowly. You're interpreting normal expansion as instability. I'm interpreting urgency as exposure. Silence. Then, sharper. You think I need your father's property to survive? I think you tried to use it to breathe. That landed. Harder than I expected. His jaw tightened. You have no idea what you're talking about. I have documents. He stared at me. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said something quieter. You were never supposed to see that. And there it was. Not denial. Admission. You weren't supposed to change the locks, I replied calmly. He looked away first. The city lights reflected against the glass behind him. You're dismantling everything, he said. No, I answered. I'm separating it. From what? From illusion. Silence filled the space between us. 12 years of dinners, vacations, boardrooms, quiet compromises, reduced to clarity. If this goes to court, he said slowly, it won't stay clean. I know. You're willing to risk that. Yes. He studied me as if searching for hesitation. There wasn't any. Because this was no longer about a condo. It was about structure. And once structure cracks, you either reinforce it, or you let it fall. Daniel thought he was protecting his empire. What he didn't realize was that he had already revealed its weakness. Daniel didn't raise his voice. He didn't slam doors. He didn't threaten. He recalculated. That was always his instinct. He stood in the middle of the living room, jacket folded neatly over his arm, eyes sharp but controlled. You're misreading the situation, he said. No, I replied. I'm reading it fully. The city lights shimmered behind him, reflected in the glass like fractured stars. Chicago moved on beneath us, unaware that 12 years of marriage were narrowing into documentation. You've seen projections, he continued. Not context. Then give me context. He hesitated. That was new. Daniel never hesitated. The firm took on accelerated positions, he said carefully. Strategic expansions. High upside. And high exposure, I added. All growth carries risk. Yes, I said. But not all risk is shared. Silence. He placed his jacket on the back of a chair and walked toward the bar, pouring himself water. You think I was desperate, he said without turning around. I think you were pressured. He faced me again. And you think that justifies dismantling us? No, I said calmly. I think it explains you. He stepped closer. You've built a narrative where I'm the villain. I've built a timeline, I corrected. Funeral. Lockout. Transfer. Collateral discussions. Legal escalation. Not emotion. Sequence. I didn't lock you out to hurt you, he said. Why did you do it? He held my gaze. I needed control. There it was. Unfiltered. Not love. Not partnership. Control. Of the asset, he clarified quickly. But you removed my access, I said. He didn't respond. Because we both understood the distinction didn't matter. At 9 a.m. the next morning, we sat across from each other again. This time in a mediation office downtown. Neutral space. Soft gray walls. Long conference table. A retired judge presiding with polite detachment. No raised voices. No theatrics. Just paperwork. Daniel's attorney spoke first. My client seeks equitable clarity and financial transparency. Martin responded smoothly. My client seeks preservation of independent trust assets and marital delineation. Language doing what emotion could not. Divide. Define. Preserve. The mediator leaned forward. Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore, are you pursuing reconciliation or separation? Daniel answered first. That depends on whether trust can be restored. The word almost made me smile. Trust. We are pursuing clarity, I said. The mediator nodded slowly. Clarity often precedes decision, he replied. Hours passed in structured discussion. Asset breakdowns. Liability exposure. Investment commitments. Then, finally, the condo. Daniel's attorney cleared his throat. My client acknowledges the trust's current structure. However, we question whether marital funds contributed indirectly to its maintenance. Martin didn't flinch. Maintenance expenses were paid exclusively from trust allocations, he replied. Documented. A folder slid across the table. Receipts. Wire confirmations. Insurance records. Meticulous. My father never built casually. Daniel scanned the documents quickly. This is excessive, he muttered. It's precise, I said. The mediator looked between us. Mr. Whitmore, he asked gently, what outcome are you seeking regarding the condominium? Daniel paused. Not long, but long enough. Access, he said. The words settled heavily. Financial or physical? The mediator asked. Daniel looked at me. Strategic. There it was again. Everything framed as strategy. It's not a strategy, I said quietly. It's a boundary. The room went still. The mediator folded his hands. Mrs. Whitmore, are you willing to grant any shared authority over the trust asset? No anger. No tremor. Just fact. Daniel leaned back in his chair slowly. You're choosing separation, he said. I'm choosing structure. His attorney shifted in his seat. Perhaps we should discuss broader marital resolution, he suggested. And that was the moment. The pivot. Not explosive. Not dramatic. Just inevitable. Daniel looked at the mediator. What happens if we proceed toward dissolution? The mediator answered evenly. Division of marital assets. Independent trust assets remain separate unless successfully contested. Daniel's jaw tightened. He knew the trust wasn't contestable. Not without exposing his own representations. Not without discovery. Not without risk. He looked at me again. For a condo, he said quietly. For control, I replied. Silence. Longer than any before. Finally, Daniel spoke. I won't contest the trust. It wasn't surrender. It was calculation. And the rest? The mediator asked. Daniel inhaled slowly. We'll negotiate separation. There it was. Not because of anger. Not because of betrayal. Because leverage had shifted. As we stood to leave, the mediator said something that stayed with me. Most marriages don't end over property, he said gently. They end over power. Daniel didn't respond. Neither did I. But we both knew it was true. When we stepped outside onto the Chicago sidewalk, the wind cut sharply between the buildings. Daniel adjusted his coat. You could have let me manage this, he said. I'm not an asset, I replied. He studied me one last time. You've changed. Yes. He nodded once, then walked toward his car. I didn't watch him go. I turned in the opposite direction. Because this was never about a $30 million condo. It was about the moment a man changed the locks and believed I wouldn't notice. He was wrong. The separation agreement draft arrived 1 week later. Not by courier this time. By email. Subject line, Whitmore, proposed terms. Clean. Efficient. Predictable. I was at the Evanston house when it came through. Late afternoon light filtered across the hardwood floors. The lilies from the funeral were gone now, replaced with fresh white roses. Life moves forward, even when marriages don't. I read the document slowly. Division of joint accounts. Real estate allocations. Investment splits. Retirement distributions. And then, a paragraph regarding the Grant Park condominium. Acknowledgement of the Hamilton family trust as separate property. No claim asserted. Clear. Concise. Final. Daniel hadn't contested it. He'd evaluated the cost. And stepped back. At 6 p.m. he called. I assume you've reviewed it, he said. Yes. I kept it clean. You did. There was a long pause. This isn't how I pictured things ending, he said quietly. Neither did I. Silence. I never intended to push you out, he added. You didn't, I replied. You pushed yourself. Another silence. Then, softer, you really won't reconsider? The question wasn't strategic this time. It was personal. I walked toward the window overlooking the lake. I reconsidered for 12 years, I said. He didn't respond. I adapted. I continued. I deferred. I rationalized. That's not fair. It's accurate. He exhaled slowly. I provided stability. You provided structure, I said. But only when you controlled it. Silence. He didn't argue. Because he couldn't. The next morning, we met at Martin's office to sign preliminary documents. No mediation. No tension. Just procedure. Daniel looked composed. Controlled. Like a man closing a business chapter. I wore a simple navy dress. No pearls this time. When the final page regarding the trust acknowledgement was placed in front of him, he hesitated for half a second. Then he signed. Ink on paper. No drama. No speech. Just conclusion. Afterward, we stood in the hallway outside the conference room. Two people who once shared a bed. Now sharing paperwork. I underestimated how much that moment meant, he said quietly. The funeral? Yes. I looked at him steadily. It wasn't the funeral, I said. It was the locks. He nodded once. I was under pressure, he admitted. I know. I thought I could fix it before you noticed. I noticed. Silence settled between us. Not hostile. Just honest. You'll be fine, he said. So will you. He studied my face for a long moment. For what it's worth, he added, I never stopped respecting you. I almost smiled. Respect isn't private, I said gently. It's visible. He absorbed that. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out one last item. A key card. The backup to the condo's service entrance. I don't need this anymore, he said. I took it. Cool plastic. Lightweight. He stepped back. Goodbye, Eleanor. Goodbye, Daniel. No tears. No embrace. Just two adults acknowledging the end of something that had shifted long before it broke. That evening, I returned to the Grant Park condo. Alone. The elevator opened into the foyer as it always had. The lights adjusted automatically. The skyline glowed beyond the glass. I walked slowly through the space. The dining table where documents had been spread out. The kitchen island where his valuation reports once sat. The living room where he admitted he needed control. Everything quiet now. Uncontested. I stepped onto the balcony. The air was crisp. The city. Steady beneath me. My father once stood here and said this place wasn't about real estate. He was right. It was about independence. Daniel thought the condo represented leverage. Liquidity. Strategic advantage. But it represented something else. The moment he changed the locks, he believed I wouldn't question it. Wouldn't challenge it. Wouldn't step into structure myself. He was wrong. And not because I fought loudly. Not because I retaliated. But because I read carefully. Signed deliberately. And refused to be repositioned. The divorce wouldn't finalize for several more weeks. There would be logistics. Adjustments. Conversations with extended family. But the real ending had already happened. The moment control replaced conversation. The moment assumption replaced partnership. The moment locks replaced trust. I stood there looking over Chicago as the lights shimmered across the lake. Not victorious. Not bitter. Just clear. He locked me out of a $30 million condo. But he didn't know who it belonged to. And in the end, that made all the difference. The divorce finalized on a Tuesday morning. No courtroom drama. No raised voices. Just a quiet confirmation email from Martin at 9:12 a.m. Dissolution entered. Effective immediately. 12 years. Reduced to a timestamp. I was at the Grant Park condo when I read it. Sunlight poured through the windows, catching the edge of the dining table where so many documents had once been spread out like battle plans. Now, the surface was clear. I set my phone down and stood still for a moment. Not grieving. Not celebrating. Just acknowledging. A chapter had closed exactly the way it opened, quietly. Later that afternoon, I drove to Evanston for the last time to collect a few personal items Daniel had left behind. He wasn't there. We had arranged it that way. No final conversation. No symbolic exchange. The house felt different now. Not heavy. Just transitional. I walked through each room slowly. The kitchen where we hosted holiday dinners. The living room where he once outlined 5-year growth strategies as if they were bedtime stories. The hallway where, years ago, I convinced myself that partnership meant patience. I took what belonged to me, and I left what didn't. By evening, I was back at the condo. Home. For the first time, I allowed myself to sit on the balcony without thinking about leverage, paperwork, or negotiations. The lake stretched wide and steady beneath the fading light. Boats moved slowly in the distance. The city hummed with its usual indifference. I thought about my father. About the bourbon in his study 3 years ago. About the way he slid that folder across the desk and said, "A woman should always have one thing no one can take from her." At the time, I thought he meant property. Now I understand. He meant agency. Daniel believed the condo was a $30 million asset. A line item. A tool. He saw square footage and appreciation curves. He didn't see what it represented. It wasn't about the value. It was about the structure. When he changed the locks at my father's funeral, he thought he was moving decisively. He thought I was distracted. He thought I wouldn't notice. But grief has a way of sharpening vision. Standing beside my father's coffin, feeling my phone buzz in my hand, I understood something with absolute clarity. Love without respect becomes management. And management is not marriage. The condo never needed defending emotionally. It needed defending structurally. So I did. Not with screaming. Not with revenge. With documentation. With patience. With boundaries. A few weeks after the divorce finalized, I received a small package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single item. The original key to the condo. The one my father handed me the day we closed. Attached was a short note in Daniel's handwriting. "You were right. I should have read the deed." I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I folded the note carefully and placed it inside my father's leather briefcase. Some acknowledgments arrived too late to change outcomes. But they confirmed truth. That night, I stood once more by the living room window. Chicago glittered below me. The same skyline. The same view. But I was different. Not hardened. Not wounded. Just aligned. People assume power comes from control. It doesn't. It comes from clarity. From knowing what belongs to you. And what never did. He locked me out of a $30 million condo at my father's funeral. But he didn't know who it belonged to. It belonged to a trust. It belonged to a structure. It belonged to a plan built long before he ever touched the lock. And most importantly, it belonged to a woman who finally understood that ownership isn't about keys. It's about knowing when to hold the line. If you've stayed with me until the end, I'm glad you're here. Tell me what city you're watching from. And remember this, when someone changes the locks, make sure you read the deed.